One item this evening, we're going to be giving an update on the police station project. This is obviously a huge endeavor, something that we've had a couple of trustees involved with. We now have an architect, we have a construction manager, and a very deep and widely talented staff team logging a lot of man-hours on this project. If you recall, going back to 2010, the board initiated a feasibility study to determine the cost and the pros and cons of building a new police station. Back in 2015, a new feasibility study was commissioned that significantly reduced the size of the initial estimate and reduced the cost by millions of dollars. And at that point, we've kind of gone out and initiated a design process to look at how to fit a facility that meets the needs of a 21st century police department with the physical constraints that we have. And while we're not quite done, we're at a point where it's a logical time to provide a thorough update to the board on this project and to the public. And so I will be turning things over to Mr. Perkins, who's the project manager for this effort.
Thank you, Mr. Reckless. What I'd like to do is just give a brief introduction and then introduce a couple of our members from our consultant team to walk through the floor plans and some of the conceptual renderings. As Mr. Reckless mentioned, we've done numerous studies over the years looking at the police station, the size of our police station, looking at what the deficiencies are in the building. The village board did make the decision a few years ago not to invest $8 or $9 million to try to maintain this building due to the age of it and the deficiencies, and to look at building a new building that would meet the needs of the police department. The current building highlighted in yellow here on this aerial is about 38,000 square feet. It was built in 1979. In comparison, some of our neighboring communities have police forces less than Arlington Heights. Their populations are less than Arlington Heights, and their buildings range between 70 and 80,000 square feet. Based on the feasibility study accepted last year, we are looking at a program area of 70,500 square feet, trying to fit it on a very tight site that's surrounded by the railroad tracks on the north, the village hall and parking garage on the west, the fire department, fire station on the east, and then Sigwart Street on the south. So the space needs not only are very deficient, the building is pretty worn down, but the spaces and the needs of the department are not met. So this site plan shows conceptually how the floor plan and the building could fit on the site. We are very tight west to east. So there are a couple of changes in the site plan that I'd just like to briefly talk about. The main change is in the main driveway into the parking garage. Currently, that's a 3-lane cross-section. There's a southbound and eastbound turn lane that you can get 2 vehicles in before it starts backing up and nobody can kind of circulate past those. So it's not a true turn lane, so to speak. Customers get confused when they come into our parking garage because of the curve of the driveway, and there's numerous drives to the north that go to the police parking lot that make decision points for the customers, and they get confused as to where they can go and whether they can turn right or left. So the concept driven by the need to fit the building on the site is to kind of clean that up, straighten the driveway up, which you see in the right side exhibit, and have 1 lane inbound and 1 lane outbound. So that's being studied with some traffic counts our engineering department's doing. Based on those traffic counts, we have a peak hour, 5 p.m., 51 vehicles is the peak hour exiting from that driveway, which changing to this configuration should not be negatively impacted. So this allows us to fit the building on the site. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mark Rohde with Leggett Architects and Dean Roberts with McLaren Wilson Lowry. And they're going to walk through the floor plans and the elevations. And then the 3 of us, as well as the chief and deputy chief, will be available for questions.
Okay, good evening. I'm Dean Roberts, as Charles mentioned. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the vehicle flow on the site. So I think just to pick up on something Charles said and to add a little bit more to it, I think one of the things that we wanted to try to improve on with this project is to minimize any lack of clarity that folks visiting the site had as to how they, enter the site and where they park. And then secondly, once they get out of their vehicle, if they're going to the police department to visit, make that a clear path that's easy for them to walk and it's kind of intuitively leads you to the front door. So those things seem normal, and I think it made sense to us to capture those items. And so, and then the other thing is, if we can minimize any kind of traffic conflict between vehicles and pedestrians, that's going to be a good thing to improve safety. And so toward that end, one of the desires was to think in a fresh way about the way police vehicles move in and out of the site. And so as we moved down that conversation, the thought was, hey, we have this entry, kind of a public safety entry to our campus on the east side of the police facility that's shared with the fire department. And so can we make that a primary entry point for the police vehicles and thereby minimize the police traffic on the other side of the building where pedestrians are more likely to be? And then secondly, can we also let that be our primary exit point for the police vehicles back into the community? And as the project and the site planning developed, both of those things seem to be very workable. And so we, of course, ask a lot of questions from our police professionals. Is that really going to work for you? And I think everybody kind of came on board that that was a preferred way to do that. And so I think it really achieves one of those goals of optimizing the safety for folks coming and going, both to when they're in their car, but then also when they park their vehicle to come to the front door. So those are some of the things that I wanted to kind of bring out. I think so. What will end up happening is the primary path of flow for police vehicles will be to move out of the police garage. So the police vehicle garage, which is on the north edge of the building, vehicles will come into the site and enter into this parking spot right here, and then they would flow out of the north edge and back around and exit the site between the police and fire stations. All right, so I hope that's not too much detail and people not getting bored with me, so I'll move ahead. So I think the next thing is to begin to elaborate a bit on the what's actually inside the building. And I'm going to start with the first floor. So just a quick review of what's in this building and how it's positioned within the building. One of the things that we wanted to do is situate the main public functions along Sigwalt Street. I think that's kind of intuitively where folks are going to approach the building, and they'll move into the building, and that's where the points of service are for visitors to the building by the police staff. And so the records window and the information desk, similar to the way things are situated in the current police facility, except for the fact that the records window is on the second floor. So we thought, you know what, it makes a lot of sense to bring those folks to the first floor. The other things that are on the first floor are the patrol division, and as you may already know, most of the employees of the police department work in the patrol division. So if we can optimize the efficiency of those folks who come and go continuously throughout the 24-hour period by positioning their work areas on the main floor where their vehicles are, it seemed to make a lot of sense. The other things on that floor, of course, are the area where folks in custody are brought in and booked and held for the duration that they need to be held, and also where evidence comes into the building. And then in the basement is really conceived as a place to bring all of the training components for the police department that they use on a regular basis together. To essentially create a training center. Instead of having some training functions on the second floor, some on the first, and some in the basement, we aggregated all those together, and what it really does is it allows the scenario training to be optimized. So for instance, if you're in a classroom and you go from there to a defense tactics room to get your heart rate up, and then you go onto the range to see if you can fire your weapon accurately when your heart rate is escalated, that's the kind of training scenarios we wanted to facilitate to optimize the training experience for for the officers. The other occupant, primarily of the basement, is evidenced in property, and then there's a small crime lab within the area too. Those are all functions that don't need windows, and really, because there's a lot of storage functions, lend themselves to a basement location. The second floor is the spot where the investigations division, which is the second largest group within the police department, community services and administration are the primary occupants of that, as well as the lockers and fitness. And one of the unique things that we found is that there's a lot of folks that actually enter the building on the second floor. A lot of employees, enter on the second floor, and that's because they park in the deck. And so we needed to kind of situate a portion of the building that brought folks together who may enter at the first floor and the second floor. That we feel like it was really important to strategically bring the police staff together instead of they would come to work in an area of the building and not cross paths with the other staff. We wanted to get them to have natural opportunities to cross paths with one another in the course of their day of work. And what that really is intended to do is to really bring this whole team together. So we don't have Department A, B, C, D within the police department, but it's really a one team. And if we think strategically how to plan the space, it facilitates that concept. All right. So with talking a little bit about the interior, now Mark is going to talk about the exterior design.
Exterior elevations. We have gone through a number of studies over the past few months working with Charles and his staff to bring kind of different options or ideas to you. And long story short, the direction you see, which is sort of a Romanesque style architecture, is the direction that was pretty, I'd say, unanimously agreed upon by the village staff. So I think when we first met you back in the spring, one of the things we talked about was that we felt it'd be very important for the design to complement the police and the fire station, yet not copy it. Those two buildings are very close in style and brick and materials and shapes, that we wanted something to kind of bridge the gap between them. So what we've done here is utilizing this style. We've got, hipped roofs. If you compare it to the buildings, we are a little bit taller than the fire station and a little bit shorter than the village hall. So there's kind of a nice hierarchy as you go west to east down Sigwalt. Similar things that you'll see is shingled roofs, pitched roofs to, obviously fit the character of this campus. We're going to use, operable windows where possible. We've got some at the very top, you can see some eyebrow dormers to bring natural light in and also to break up the roof mass. This building, we've got a little more stone on the front, and I know as Dean showed you the plan, we spent a lot of time working with the village staff to really figure out the best place to enter the building, and we settled on, again, a tower element at the southwest corner, but it's definitely downplayed from, the village hall. We didn't want to compete. So we want it to be, very obvious as to where the entry of the building was. And so you can see on the left side of that upper rendering there, that element is the tower. We've also put a conference room in the second floor there because we think it's a good use of space, makes the tower more functional, and we think it'll be a really nice conference room for the police staff as well. The other mass that kind of sticks out is on the right side of that. That's about a 1.5 story mass, and that is basically the community room. So those two items kind of help to break up the facade and give a very, what we feel is an inviting feel. So the lighter cream colored are stone accents. We don't know at this time exactly what type of stone. We are just getting started with looking at brick and stone and window and colors and materials, and we'll be working with the group with that, and obviously we'll present that to you when the time is right. On the rear elevation, you can see the two triangular or hipped roofs facing you. Those are the men's and women's locker room. And as much as we might like to think there's a front and a back to the building, we've driven all over town, and you can see this building from all four sides from someplace. Obviously, the train is very prominent view, but even coming down Arlington Heights Road to the south, and you look to the left, if you're far enough away, you can see it. So we've tried to make the building very nice on all four sides. You'll notice in the back, we have less stone detailing, again, trying to simplify it. One of the things I think is a very nice thing we've done to try to save a little cost, and this is, I have to give credit to our construction manager, that they suggested the vehicle parking garage be a precast concrete structure. It's going to have the same brick on it, but it's going to be able to be built very quickly and cost effectively. So that's kind of the lower area, and then those two masses sit on top of it. This is the east elevation looking west at the top, and then conversely the west looking east. It's sort of symmetrical, and that the main body of the building has a nice hip roof, and then the two sides protrude out 11 feet, and they have the gabled ends. We are looking at those two ends, and we know there's some comments that there may be a little bit too much stone on those, and so we don't want you to think by any means these are finished. These are early design development options, and we're certainly working our way towards refinement of that. But you can see the scale of the tower. So some nice perspectives. This would be basically the southwest corner if you were in, say, the first parking lot right in the corner of Arlington Heights and Sigwalt. And I think this really does a nice job of showing the hierarchy of the Village Hall, stepping down to the police and then the fire station, and that the the police, like I said, does not copy but fits in. The other view is sort of from the southeast looking northwest. So like I said, depending where you're at, all four sides of this building will be easily seen. Some rear views, this would be kind of, the top one would be northeast corner, almost if you're in the back of the fire station parking lot looking towards the building. Like I said, the lower mass with that garage door in it, that is the police vehicle storage building. And then above it, coming perpendicular to it, are the two masses for the locker rooms. There are some windows shown. They probably will not be that tall, or they will be some sort of spandrel panel, but we think it'd be very nice to get some natural light into the locker rooms, obviously at a high enough level where you can't view into the locker rooms. And then the lower elevation, again, the rear view with the squad car coming out. And I think as Dean mentioned, there was some concern, we've been discussing this at our last couple of meetings, about conflict of vehicular traffic at the northwest corner. So, the path is to enter the east, go out the north, and then go back to the east and around by the fire station to avoid any squad car conflict. You have the option, if you need to go out to Arlington Heights Road or an emergency or something, you can certainly do it. Aerial bird's eye view, kind of a rear bird's eye view. And then, there's your flat-on elevation, so you can definitely see sort of the context of how it fits into the campus setting. I think that's it for now. Questions, or Charles, anything else you want to?
I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. First, there are a couple other components to this project that include utilizing existing facilities that the village currently owns to try to keep costs down. One of those is the former Fire Academy building. So we are working with the architects and a construction manager to do an early bid package to renovate that so the police department can move out some of their long-term storage components from the police department, from the police station now to that, what we will now call the police annex. That saves us building additional square footage on site for things like motorcycle storage and bicycle storage and other long-term needs. In addition, we're also, the team is also working on an early bid package to renovate a portion of the fourth floor of this building that would again be long-term storage needs. Some of the evidence needs that the police department has to be kept almost forever. And to utilize the fourth floor of this building for that helps keep the square footage down for the new police station, helps keep the costs down. The last thing I'd like to mention is next steps on this project. The next steps would be a preliminary review with the Design Commission and Plan Commission to start the zoning and the design review process. We also plan to host a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors to the south of Sigwald Street. We require all developers to do that, and we plan to do that ourselves and invite the neighbors to come and see the plans so that they can understand what's being proposed. And then moving forward with the construction drawings and getting those ready for bid next year. So with that, both the consultants, myself, Chief and Deputy Chief, happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Well, certainly very impressive. And we thank all those involved in getting us to this point in the process, the consultants and staff, and not only them, but our two board members on the committee as well. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that I think we're right on time in terms of the timeline, and we want to keep moving forward so that we can provide the best facility for our police department that really deserves it. And so let me first call on our two members of the committee if they have any comments. Trustee Tenali or Glasgow?
Sure. So I think everyone can see we've come a long way. We've come a long way with efficiencies. We've come a long way with economics, architecture. The guys have done a great job planning. This is a really, really tight site. Charles, if you go back to the original slide here that shows the old building on it, and this might be hard to do quickly, but if you look at that yellow, that's how many square feet?
Well, the building is about 38,000 square feet, but it's a two-story building, so probably half of that.
Quickly, if you can, show this, the new site plan, the difference between the two, how it fits in there. This is a bit of a shoehorn, but we as architects know how fun that can be and challenging it can be. They've done a great job with it. Spatial relationships inside, I think the chief and everyone who's going to be living here can appreciate the hard work of getting all those components together. Trustee Glasgow was instrumental on a lot of the relationships when he goes and visits these buildings in his profession, and it's important to have certain components where they are, so you guys have done a great job. Architecturally, if you go to the outside real quick, really nicely done. It's a very traditional design. It's a warm design. There's elements in here that I think people will feel comfortable about viewing, entering, walking by, driving by. It doesn't jump out and frighten anyone. There are some buildings that are cold and austere, and this one I think is going to be warm and comfortable for everyone to use. Two questions I had. One I brought up in a meeting that we had as a committee level. I'd like to see that stone detailing on the two sides brought down. I think it's okay to bring that down. It's a cost savings that we can probably appreciate. And then I had a question on the rear where the parking garage is, and this may be a security issue, but was there any consideration given to natural light up high to bring into that garage area? Maybe you can just shed some light on that.
The answer is yes, and we forgot to draw it. No, yes, we will. We'll get it on there. It's not shown yet. We actually have it noted on the plans, natural light along the back wall. So we haven't quite figured out how we're going to do it. And I think if you saw a recent rendering, at one point we had the two masses coming out configured a little differently. We had it more on one side, and so we brought two out and have added gabled roofs. So we need to work in some sort of windows. I think, and I would defer to these gentlemen, they would probably want to be up high.
Yeah, I would think.
It's a secure site, but still, why invite, people to see in there? So we
Exactly.
think they could be clear story windows up at 6 or 8 feet high. So that's a good point. We should do it. And then, yeah, I know what you're saying on the two gabled ends. We should probably take down, thanks, Gerald. We should probably take down some of that stone a
Well, I
little
think
bit
it's
there.
you've done a really nice job on that corner entry element, and I think we can probably bring that stone down with all that window fenestration, and it doesn't need to be quite as strong or heroic as you've got it here, and save a few bucks. I know for a fact stone's a little bit more expensive than the brick, so we can save a few dollars there. Otherwise, I think it's great. I think I'm just really happy to be a part of the committee. It's been a pleasure working with everyone on it.
One thing I wanted to mention, I'm glad, it's good to have an architect, on the board, but you mentioned, kind of the warmth, and we just want to mention some of the areas, like when you walk in the tower and that public corridor running along Sigwalt and that community room are going to have some element of wood. It may be, 3.5, 4 foot of wainscot or a little bit more. But again, we're going to try to warm that up with natural materials to try to get rid of that sort of, feeling that maybe people would have about visiting the police station. Of course, once you get behind that wall, it's going to be very traditional office carpet, drywall and things like that. But we are going to try to continue with, some lanterns hanging from it, possibly some wood ceilings in some or all of the areas, some exposed wood, things like that, just to try to warm it up. So we are getting ready. In fact, our next meeting on the 16th, we're bringing our interiors group. We're going to have kind of our kickoff meeting with the staff, and we're starting to think about interior materials, finishes, colors, and all that. So that's coming up as well.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Glasgow?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have to say, this particular station and all that we've gone through, the iterations that we've gone through, the multiple meetings that we've had, I have to say that the functionality on the interior is outstanding. And the way that you guys have ended up listening to the input from the two members of the village board, and you've got an architect there who's giving you, Trustee Tenali has given, just little insights here and there that have actually saved money on the project and has done a very nice job in doing so. But the functionality suggestions that we gave you, I really, truly appreciate, because this works. It's the 21st century. Policing is a lot different now. This actually encompasses, in the plans that you've designed and how this is going to be designed, encompasses the needs, the safety, the security needs, the functionality, the training, the scientific needs, everything that we have talked to you about, from the DS as a members of the board, as the board speaking as a whole, and also the input that both of us have given during the course of the committee meetings. Chief Morning and Deputy Chief Pecora you guys have put in a ton of time towards this, and I appreciate it very, very, very much. Charleston has done, I can't, how many meetings have we been to where you and I have sat down together on this? The amount of time that's gone into this, I don't think the public really realizes. But to have this kind of warmth, this kind of inviting, this kind of community-minded, approachable police station from the outside, and then through the entryway, and then have the functionality on the back end at conservative costs and taking into account saving money where we could. This has just been a fantastic project to work on, and I'm very, very proud of it, proud of working with Trustee Tenali and the rest of the commission. Thank you very much for listening. And that was one of the reasons that we recommended to the board that you guys be the architects, because you listened to what we were suggesting. This is going to be something that all of Arlington Heights is going to be very, very proud of. So thank you very much.
Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Trustee Glasgow and Trustee Tenali and the staff for everything that you've done to bring us thus far. Charles, can you tell me, what is the Plan Commission and Design Commission going to be discussing?
We need to amend the plan unit development for the new building, and then the design commission will be reviewing the exterior facades.
Okay. And when are we going to start to see the pricing on all of this?
We will, our construction manager, Riley Construction, they run projections at different phases of the project. So we've just wrapped up schematic design phase. They've run projection for schematic design phase, and then as we get into design development, they will run additional projections, on costs for this project. So we're tracking those costs every step of the way to make sure that we're within the budget that's been allocated for this project. We have an extensive list of value engineering items that we're evaluating, different ways of building different parts that would be more cost effective than others, and that's kind of an ongoing process as well.
Okay. So do you think it might be premature for Design Commission to be evaluating it now prior to that? I mean, is there a need for them to look at it now?
Well, we'd rather get through that planning and zoning process before we do all the final, before or simultaneously as we're doing the construction drawings. We don't want to do the construction drawings and get it bid and then go through, and then there's changes and we have to rebid parts. So, our thought process was to start the preliminary process with Design Commission and Plan Commission, and then go through the formal process probably in January, February, and we'll be back before you at that point, and we'll have more details on the plans as well.
If I could as well, Trustee Scaletta, one of the, if obviously you all remember that we borrowed the money at the end of last year to fund this project. So the money is already there, and what that does is two things. One, we were taking advantage of favorable interest rates, but number two, it makes it very clear we can't go over budget on this project because it's already funded. And so we're very conscious of that. As Charles indicated, that's something that, we've made very clear to the architects and our construction manager that, we have there's a line, and, when we get close to approaching it, we start pushing back. And, I would love to be at a place where we're coming in under budget and we're looking at what we're going to do with those extra funds. But, whether we're going to abate the bonds or something along those lines long term. But when we have these meetings, Director Keeney is there, I'm in many of the meetings, and there's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of questions and challenges of why do we need that? How much does that cost? And a big part of our the construction manager as well is to really look at those techniques, and they've identified some good savings, some things that someone outside the field really wouldn't be thinking of. So it's a big part of the process, but we are trying to operate within. We are operating within that the boundaries that were developed by the board last year.
And just as one example, we've already made a decision to reduce the floor-to-ceiling height on the first floor and second floor, which saves almost $250,000 by making some slight changes to reduce, only by a foot to two. Makes a significant difference in the volume and size of the building and cost savings. So we have those discussions every other week when we meet, to make sure we're on track from a budget point of view and from a timing point of view.
Okay. I mean, I have no problem with it going before the Plan Commission. I just wanted to make sure that we're not asking the Design Commission to review something that, might be altered by the board due to costs. And so I'm just making sure that we're not putting the cart before the horse, and that we have an opportunity to review it. I appreciate the fact that everyone is looking at the costs of this building and all the details that go into creating this building, but considering the costs. And I think that that's just one of the reasons why we have two trustees that are sitting on the committee. I'd feel more comfortable when we start to see some of the updates of the costs. I trust that everything is moving in the right direction, but I'd feel more comfortable when we start to see some updated costs. Thank you.
Trustee Lebeds.
Thank you. I want to thank my fellow trustees who've served on the committee, as well as the staff and the consultants all involved. This is a very nice-looking building. Thank you. And more importantly, a very functional, nice-looking building, which is definitely what we want. A quick question about the community room. What is the size of that? And I don't mean it's so many square feet, but like how many people could be there if someone was having a meeting?
So it's set up in kind of training room format, meaning that there's rows of tables and chairs, and it's intended to accommodate 50 people at a time in that kind of a setting, which is probably its primary mode. However, we have a room next door where you can move all the tables out and bring more chairs in, and then the capacity of the room goes up a bit because, of course, the tables have been replaced by chairs. But does that give you the numbers you're looking for?
Yeah. Do you have a feel for how many, if it was just chairs in a row? I just want to.
Not sure if we counted that. It's probably going to be like in the 75 range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It could go a bit higher.
I mean, as a community room, you'd want to be able to have something that could host, a significant group of people for an evening meeting or something like that. So, and also, I know it's come up on again and off again, but in terms of green initiatives in the construction and things like that, I assume that that sort of thing is being looked at as well as priced in terms of what's affordable and so forth.
Yes, the sustainability aspect or the green initiatives are being looked at, and maybe Charles or Mark can comment. Just in general, we do have a scorecard and a checklist that we're tracking as we go through the design process to be certain that we're meeting the sustainability goals that were set out by the board.
Good, great, thank you, that's all I have, thanks.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks to everyone who's been involved with this. So the way I understand this, so all the entrance to the parking and the facility will be on the east end then of the facility, Charles, correct?
So the entry for the police personnel will be towards the back of the facility and the west for pedestrian.
To the right of where the booking and Sallyport is, correct?
For vehicle to the right and pedestrian on the left.
So will there be any kind of gateway, to gain access to that at all, or will it just be open?
I'll go to the site plan. It's probably best to see. So the access to the patrol vehicle parking will have overhead doors. We have talked about whether there's a need for some kind of security gate control at this driveway and at this driveway. At this point, we don't feel there's a need to install that, but we are designing it with conduit that can underground so that it could be easily installed at a future date.
Because it seems like a number of the stations that I've seen actually screen that area in with fencing, and seems like that adds that extra layer of security there from the standpoint of having cars driving into the back access and things like that.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, but have felt that it hasn't really been an issue on the site so far. But we want to plan for it in the future. And that shared driveway right now is primarily used by the fire department and police department on the east, and very rarely do we get a citizen going in that direction. But the thought process is to put the underground infrastructure in so it's easy to add at a future date should that become an issue.
Okay. And so as far as from the standpoint of public access, since the entrance will be along Sigwald there, is there going to be any kind of designated spaces or anything, or will people just park where they are parking now for the village hall? Or
Yeah, for the most part, customer parking for the police department would be in the 30-minute parking in the garage. But right now, it's very difficult for any customer who parks there to go to the police station. You actually have to walk in the drive aisle around the existing garage stair tower. There's maybe a foot sidewalk, if that. So the proposal here on the right is to make a clear pedestrian access. So when people have parked their vehicle, they know they can get on the sidewalk, they can walk to the front of the police department. Down the road, we could always evaluate whether it made sense to add some customer parking in the surface parking lot to the south. In this parking lot here, it's currently used by employees, but we could look at adding some customer parking there. We do have some over in this lot that doesn't really get very heavily used, so we don't want to lose parking if it's not necessary, but we can always make those adjustments down the road.
Okay, thank you. From the standpoint of the upper, area, I guess the roofing area, is there area for any kind of attic or extra storage up there? It seems like a pretty high peaked area that there might be some kind of.
Yes, there is opportunity for attic access and attic storage for both storage and utilities. And Mark, would you like to kind of comment a little bit on that if you could?
'Cause I know we've used that on the fourth floor here, and it's worked out well, so I didn't know if they're going to build it in such a way that that could be used for extra space then?
Well, it's interesting, we're talking about a stair tower at the northwest corner. We're still working on some studies with that, of how to do that, but one option is that could bring you up to the third floor. We've discussed 3 different mechanical systems, and we've got it narrowed down to one. And one of the benefits of having the pitched roof is we're going to be able to put pretty much all the equipment within the roof space. So there'll be a chiller that'll be sitting outdoors in the back with the transformer and a generator, and we'll build a wall around it. But the rest of the mechanical equipment will be inside. Now, we haven't worked out the details, but speaking to Scott and Chris from Public Works, we're going to get some sort of, I don't want to say catwalk, but some sort of platform or something up there where the mechanical equipment can be easily surfaced, without going up through a ladder, up through the roof or something like that. We can certainly, there is going to be a lot of room. Now, the roof isn't quite as tall as Village Hall, but there absolutely will be some space there. And as we get more into it, we can certainly look at if additional space or floor space could be utilized. But the first thing we really need to do is see how much of it's going to be taken up by mechanical equipment, because I think it's going to be a fair amount. That's one of the reasons that we switched on the back, the 2 locker rooms that came out. Previously, we had flat roofs on them, but we wanted that ability to have mechanical units above there as well. So right now, we think it's mostly spoken for, but it's an excellent point, and I'm sure we can discuss it, as the project moves on.
Right. I mean, obviously, now's the time to
Yep.
to plan for that if there's availability and can create more space, because I know that when we started out with larger space and pared it down, I'm sure there's other things we could put there, so.
Absolutely.
From the standpoint of access on the second floor, is there, from the parking garage, what, will it just be like, well, I don't know if I want to discuss how access is done, but I'm sure that's also going to be secured and everything.
That's the one component that we're still kind of working through, and we're having another meeting with the group on Friday to kind of go. We had two options. We've had like numerous options. We had two options last week, and now we've got two sub-options after those. But we're really trying to figure out the best way to get access into from the parking garage into the building. Knowing that the parking garage, the roof is technically a third floor, and our building only has 2 floors. We've talked about putting something along the east side of the garage, which nobody was terribly in favor of, or utilizing the existing stair or the new stair in the building. So that's kind of the one area that's a little bit, I'd say, unresolved yet, but I would say within the week, don't you think, we'll probably have a pretty good direction on that. But we're definitely working on that.
Okay. And then, from the standpoint where you mentioned about the community room, about use of wood and things like that, I think that might go back to what Trustee Scaletta said about cost and what the difference would be, like putting wood in versus not putting wood in, and maybe those would be ways to save additional dollars as far as if there's a much higher cost with doing that, even though maybe aesthetically it might look better, but maybe from a cost standpoint it might be much more expensive.
And I don't want to speak for Riley. They've been great to work with the construction manager. They put together a budget based on our early September drawings. And they had talked and met with us, and we gave them kind of a ballpark idea about room finishes. So they already had that sort of programmed in. Now, granted, we don't have details and elevations and sections, but conversationally, we were saying, this area would be tile, this would be carpet, this would be glazed or ground face block, this would be drywall. So they've already taken that into consideration with the estimates they've been working on currently. As Charles mentioned, they do have a pretty sizable list of potential value engineering items that can either be added in, taken out, or put in as an alternate bid. So they've got a nice kind of list that we go over every meeting as well. And again, I'd rather defer to Charles on the budget aspect, but I think everybody's fairly comfortable with the direction we're going now.
Yeah, we're always happy to save money and come in under budget, so.
Yep.
Charles, I don't know if you want to talk.
Well, on the finish, we're quite away from actually any
Right.
decisions
I
on the finishes in the rooms, and we're talking about whether there's the opportunity to use recycled wood that we already have that can be used to save money. So, those are discussions that we're having and will continue to have in ways to make the building still look good but keep those costs in check.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Theodore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this looks really good, and I remember when we started this process, one of my concerns was there was a whole list of costs, and they had big ranges to them, and it was a temporary facility. So my question to whoever, Charles, is how are we doing on the temporary facility? Because that seems to be one of those variables that could throw us either out of budget or keep us under budget. That's the one thing I'm concerned about, so if you could, kind of bring us up to date on that.
Yes, so we have a team that's this is a complex project, many moving parts. So we have a team that's been looking at temporary locations. We identified 18 sites. We reached out to building owners and their brokers and had them submit and respond to a one-page letter of interest. And some building owners or property owners were not interested in either having the police department or on a temporary lease. They didn't want to tie up their property for a year and a half to 2 years and then have somebody who wants to sign a 10-year lease, and we understood that. We then went and toured 7 sites. We've been back and toured, I think, 2 or 3, a second occasion, and we're still exploring those numbers. We've not started negotiating with anybody yet, and we will be preparing a confidential report for the board to get your direction, because that is an executive session item that can be discussed. And so we'll be looking at that right after the first of the year to get direction from the board on what channel to take. But we are still tracking within our budget for that item as well.
What was our approximate date we were looking to move into a temporary facility?
We are looking at between May and July.
That was the perfect update. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Trustee Farwell.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you for everybody that's been involved in this whole endeavor, and Trustees Glasgow and Tenali, thank you very much for your continued efforts. I think it's pretty amazing that we're able to bring our professional lives into our civil lives and our civil service to benefit the entire village, and I appreciate that very much. 2 points to kind of piggyback on Trustee Rosenberg's comments, as well as Trustee Scaletta's on appointments and cost savings. I think one area that we might look to for some consistency would be Firehouse Station number 2, where we have administrative services on the second floor. And they've got their own entrance going in on the, off the parking lot. They're very nice. They're modest, but they're very nice. So we might want to take their lead off of that rather than, say, the Village Hall, where there might be more natural elements, just as an idea. And also, thank you for the presentation and your continued work. I would just want to tweak one word that was used a couple times in looking at the landscape of it. The word hierarchy. I think it is a little sensitive. I don't want the size of the police station being smaller than the Village Hall, yet taller than the fire station, and the word hierarchy to be ever correlated with the importance of the police and the fire departments as being equally important. And that the Village Hall, I mean, if you were to look at hierarchy, I would reverse that. I think the other two should be bigger if we were looking at hierarchy. So, I mean, I just want to be a little bit careful on that, because I know that is not the intent at all in the presentation, as I know it's not the intent of the administration, certainly this board to view it as such. But thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to your progress. Fantastic
Trustee
job.
Blackwood.
Thank you, Mayor. I too agree that this has really been a yeoman's worth of effort. And Charles, I have a question for you that probably you can answer very quickly. The 4th floor that we have upstairs where there's forensic storage, will there continue to be storage there, or are we going to centralize everything in the police station? Is that the intent?
No, there will be long-term storage relocated to the 4th floor of Village Hall to keep costs down and keep the size of the building down. Forensics that's there now on a temporary basis will ultimately move into the new police station.
Okay, so we may be doing some rearranging then of storage.
That's correct.
How many square feet is the forensics area?
I would say it's approximately 1,500 square feet currently.
Okay, and so the evidence collection is going to be separate and different than the storage and the forensics area that we're looking at then?
Yes, and I'll ask Dean or even Deputy Chief Pecora to answer that question.
It appears to be a little
Experts.
bit larger too. I'm maybe twice the size then of the forensics area?
You're correct in the fact that there are several components of the property and evidence that comes in, gets initially kind of triaged, and then some of that goes for processing in forensics, some of it goes to storage. And then from the storage, some of that is long-term, like the Part 1 crimes that are more severe have legislative requirements to hold those things for longer. Sometimes stuff will go on a shelf and it'll still be there 30, 40, 50 years or more later. So that's the kind of storage that lends itself well to being off-site, because it's very rarely accessed.
And that'll continue to stay off-site then?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And then the collection area, like you said, that's just where newer pieces of evidence would be coming in then?
That's correct, and that will be in the new facility because it makes sense for all of that to be together with the main operation.
And that's about 3,000 square feet then, roughly?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, thank you.
Anything further from the board? Anything further from staff? Mr. Eklund?
One more comment, just to dovetail with what Trustee Rosenberg and Trustee Farwell said, just so that, to make sure that they know that they're heard. When we've looked at this process, a couple of things. One, we recognized and identified very early there's a difference between the function of the village hall and the police department building, not in terms of hierarchy, but in terms of the village hall as a public building. We host hundreds of outside groups here a year, and so by its nature, its fit and finish is very different than a building that's operationally focused like a police department. We still want to have a building that's attractive, that fits in with the neighborhood and reflects our high standards, but it's a different type of building, and that's very much reflected in it. The other thing is, as we go through this process, everyone plays a different role in the process, and the architects obviously are there to stretch our brains, get us thinking aspirationally, making us aware of what's possible. Our Public Works Department thinks, how the heck are we going to maintain all this stuff once it's up and running? Tom and I are talking about how are we going to pay for this? Charles tries to balance the ties, and then our construction engineer generally is looking at, well, these are some other things you may want to consider as alternatives. And so it works its way through the process, and it's actually a very enjoyable process. And the thing that, as you mentioned, that's very unique as well here is we have two trustees involved that we just are very fortunate that happen to have background in this, and they bring a very high-level review of this as well. So we are talking about those things, and we appreciate the feedback, but I just want to make sure that you guys know that we're taking this very seriously.
Well, good comments, Randy. A good way to end. I think it is a real team effort, and so we appreciate all members of the team who have gotten us to this point in the process, and let's keep moving forward. So thank you all.